The 2008 K2 disaster. On August 1st, 2008, K2 became the scene of the deadliest day in its history. That morning, 24 climbers from several countries set out from Camp 4 for the summit. The weather was clear. Conditions looked perfect. Spirits were high. But K2 is known as the Savage Mountain for a reason. The climbers were following the Abruzzi Spur route, the most common path to the top. Beyond Camp 4 lies the Bottleneck, a narrow gully at over 8,000 meters. To pass it, you must cross under a massive wall of hanging ice, a frozen tower the size of an apartment building. It is unstable. It shifts constantly. Climbers fear it more than anything else on K2. The group moved slowly. Progress was delayed because the fixed ropes meant to guide them through the Bottleneck were missing in several sections. At this altitude, small delays are dangerous. Oxygen is scarce. Every minute spent above 8,000 meters pushes the body closer to collapse. By late afternoon, most climbers finally reached the summit, but the delays meant they were still at the top far too late. The safe turnaround time had passed hours earlier. Darkness was falling. Then disaster struck. A massive block of ice broke off from the serac above the Bottleneck. It crashed down the slope. Destroying the remaining fixed ropes. The only safe path back to Camp 4 was gone in an instant, and the climbers were trapped in the death zone. Temperatures plunged below minus 40 degrees. The wind picked up. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. The group had an impossible decision to make. Either risk descending the Bottleneck in total darkness with no ropes and falling ice above, or spend the night high on the mountain exposed to minus 40 degrees, hurricane winds, and almost no oxygen. Over the next 24 hours, the mountain claimed life after life. Some of the climbers who chose to descend fell to their deaths on the icy slope. Among them were Norwegian climber Rolf Bay and South Korean climber Hwang Jin-ho. Others who decided to stay froze to death during the cold night. Irish climber Mcdonnells was among those who died that night. His story, however, is so extraordinary it deserves to be told later on its own. By sunrise, only 13 climbers were still alive. 11 were killed. Many of their bodies remain where they fell, frozen in place. Silent reminders of how quickly triumph can turn to tragedy on K2. Alison Hargreaves. By mid-1995, British climber Alison Hargreaves stood at the peak of her career. Just 3 months earlier, on May 13th, she became the first woman to summit Mount Everest solo and without supplemental oxygen or Sherpa support. Her achievement made headlines around the world. That summer, Alison set her sights on an even greater challenge, K2. Her goal was ambitious, attempting to climb 3 of the world's highest peaks, Everest, K2, and Kanchenjunga, all in the same season. By August, she was in Pakistan's Karakoram range. The weather was harsh and many climbers abandoned their attempts, but Alison pressed on. On August 13th, she joined a small international group for a summit push from Camp 4 at around 7,600 meters. At about 6:45 in the evening, Alison reached the summit of K2 alongside other experienced climbers like Rob Slater and Bruce Grant. But their happiness of reaching the summit wouldn't last long. Upon descent, a powerful storm rolled in without warning. Winds exceeding 100 miles per hour slammed into the summit ridge. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, and the temperature plummeted. One by one, climbers began disappearing into the storm. From lower down the mountain, other climbers later reported seeing Alison's distinctive purple jacket on the slopes, but no one was able to reach her. Her body was never recovered. Alison Hargreaves was only 33 years old. She left behind a young daughter and a 6-year-old son. Her death shocked the climbing community and sparked intense debate about risk, ambition, and responsibility. To many, Alison was a pioneer, a woman who pushed the limits of human endurance and redefined what was possible in mountaineering. But to others, her choices were controversial. As a mother of 2, critics question why she risked her life on the world's deadliest mountains. Her name remains etched in history as one of the most remarkable and most debated figures in mountaineering. The Bottleneck's hanging corpses. When you think about mountains, you probably think of Mount Everest, the tallest, the most famous, the one every climber dreams of reaching. But while Everest might be the tallest, K2 is the deadliest. On Everest, roughly 1 in 30 climbers dies attempting the summit. On K2, the odds are closer to 1 in 4. K2 rises 8,611 meters in the remote Karakoram range, straddling the border between Pakistan and China. Its weather is unpredictable, rescue options are almost non-existent, and there are no helicopter evacuations above base camp. Unlike Everest, K2 has no well-trodden commercial routes and far fewer Sherpa support teams. Here, climbers are truly on their own. Nowhere is that danger more visible than in the Bottleneck. The Bottleneck sits at around 8,200 meters, just 400 meters below the summit of K2, along the Abruzzi Spur, the most commonly used route to the top. It's an extremely narrow and steep section, directly beneath massive, unstable towers of ice that can break off without warning. To get through, climbers must cross about 100 meters right under these hanging ice cliffs, completely exposed the entire time. The slope here is so steep that one wrong step will send you plunging thousands of feet towards your death. Despite its deadly reputation, almost everyone attempting K2 chooses this path. That's because, ironically, the Bottleneck is also the fastest and easiest way to reach the summit. Spending less time above 8,000 meters, the so-called death zone, is often seen as worth the risk. Over the years, dozens of climbers have died here. Because of the extreme altitude and danger, recovering bodies from the Bottleneck is almost impossible. Many remain exactly where they fell, frozen to the ropes, dangling over the abyss. Climbers call this place the Hanging Garden of Death. Every person who attempts K2 must pass through it. To reach the summit, you must walk among the dead. Mcdonnell's heroic death. Jer McDonnell was part of the 2008 K2 disaster, the deadliest day in the mountain's history. But his story is so extraordinary, so heroic, that it deserves to be told on its own. Irish climber Jer McDonnell reached the summit of K2 on August 1st, 2008. It was his first time on the mountain. After years of training and sacrifice, he had achieved his dream. But Jer's story didn't end at the summit. On the descent, a massive block of ice collapsed above the Bottleneck, destroying the fixed ropes and trapping climbers high on the mountain. It was chaos. Darkness was falling. Temperatures plunged to minus 40 degrees. Most climbers were focused on survival, but Jer made a different choice. He spotted 3 climbers tangled in the ropes beneath the serac. Exhausted and frostbitten, they were stuck and close to death. Instead of continuing down to safety, Jer turned around and climbed back up. For hours he fought at extreme altitude to cut the ropes and free them. At over 8,000 meters, every movement felt impossible, every breath a battle. Somehow Jer managed to free all 3 climbers just before another avalanche swept through the Bottleneck. Jer disappeared into the whiteout and was never seen alive again. Tragically, 2 of the 3 climbers later died further down the mountain due to injuries and exhaustion. But Kim Jae-soo, a South Korean climber, survived and made it back home. Other survivors later described his actions as one of the bravest decisions ever made on K2. While others were focused on escaping, Ger chose to stay and help. He was 37 years old. Back home in Ireland, his story became a symbol of courage, compassion, and sacrifice. Kim Hong-bin. In July 2021, South Korean climber Kim Hong-bin achieved what many believed was impossible. Despite losing all 10 fingers to frostbite in 1991, he became the first disabled person to summit all 14 of the world's 8,000-meter peaks. K2 was the final mountain on his list. After years of struggle, sacrifice, and training, he reached the summit on July 18th. At the top, Kim sent a message to his team at base camp, his voice filled with emotion. The dream he had chased for 3 decades was finally complete. But the descent would prove fatal. Near Camp 4, at around 7,900 meters, Kim fell 15 meters into an ice crevasse. He was injured but alive. For hours, rescuers from neighboring teams tried to reach him, lowering ropes and calling his name. But the terrain was steep, and the weather worsening by the minute. Before they could reach him, Kim disappeared into the darkness. He was 57 years old. Back home in South Korea, his death made headlines nationwide. To many, Kim became a symbol of perseverance and determination. A man who reached the top of the world but paid the ultimate price. The mystery of Dudley Wolfe. In the summer of 1939, an American expedition attempted to climb K2. It was one of the earliest attempts on the mountain, long before modern gear, satellite weather forecasts, or rescue systems. Among the team was Dudley Wolfe, a 45-year-old climber from Boston. Wolfe wasn't a professional mountaineer, but he was determined and ambitious. The expedition pushed high up the Abruzzi Spur, establishing Camp 7 at around 7,300 meters, dangerously high even by today's standards. Wolfe struggled in the thin air and soon became too weak to descend. His teammates, also exhausted but able to move, made the controversial decision to retreat down the mountain, leaving Wolfe at Camp 7 with food and instructions to wait. Days passed. No one returned. Eventually, 3 Sherpas attempted a desperate rescue. They climbed back up the spur, risking their own lives to reach Wolfe's tent. They found him alive but weak, sitting inside his sleeping bag. They tried to help him down, but somewhere on the descent, all 3 Sherpas vanished. None of them were ever seen again. For over 6 decades, Dudley Wolfe's fate remained a mystery. Then in 2002, an American team discovered his remains on a high ridge. His body was perfectly preserved by the ice, a frozen time capsule from one of K2's earliest tragedies. The Wolfe story became a haunting reminder that on K2 mistakes are rarely forgiven, and that sometimes the mountain keeps its secrets for generations. This video might have been a bit grim, but remember, you don't have to climb these mountains. Here's a short time lapse of me drawing the thumbnail. I hope it can cheer you up again. Thanks for watching.